Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down No Country for Old Men. It's a film that I think is one of the best from this side of the millennium, and it's a movie that's stuck with me since the very first time I saw it. Based on the book of the same name, there's a lot to talk about with the film. Now, we actually have done a big in-depth breakdown on the film before. That was an expansive, in-depth analysis in which we went through the film scene by scene, paid for numerous editors, spent a lot of time writing and recording it, and then a bit of a snag popped up. Paramount said we weren't allowed to use any footage from the film and then ended up striking the channel, which was frustrating because at the time the movie was free on YouTube, so it wasn't like we were harming its revenue. Obviously we pushed back, and as a workaround they said we could use still images instead. So we did a complete re-edit from the ground up and turned every clip to an image. I had to pay for the editors again, spend days going through it, and in the end I think the video is pretty crap. I've never been proud of it, and it's just like 50 minutes of a slideshow. That's what actually pushed me into moving to camera, because if the videos mainly are footage, a studio can't say they own it. So I've decided to go back through the movie and remake the video with our updated setup. I hope you enjoy it, and with that out of the way, let's get into No Country for Old Men.
The Coen don't have no say. It's just you.
Now, upon starting it up, I was instantly reminded about one of the coolest things that the film does. That is that there's next to no music. Well, except that bit, but other than that, the soundtrack's stripped away, which gives the movie a more realistic feel. In real life, we're not walking around with the soundtrack behind us, and it gives the film a feeling of authenticity. At points, you feel like a fly on the wall, and it just adds to the overall atmosphere. Now, at its core, what I think makes this movie so unforgettable is Anton Chigurh, who's played expertly by Javier Bardem. This was an actor I'd never seen before this film, but within 5 minutes, he was burned into my brain. You can see his influence stretching out from this movie, and it's easy to see why they cast him for Skyfall. Bardem cuts a cold and ruthless figure in the film, and we begin with him being arrested. Over the top of this, we hear the voice of Sheriff Bell, who's played by none other than Tommy Lee Jones, who refuses to sanction Chigurh's buffoonery. Now, throughout the film, Bell basically represents the old ways and how much change can seem terrifying. You hit a point where you feel you can't keep up with the world, and thus there's a detachment that forces you to step back. Bell often talks about how things were done in the past, with the future providing some scary unknowns. It's something that's constantly relevant, and even I get scared of like these AI hosts who look sexier than me, and even sound less robotic. Throughout the opening though, he recounts how in the olden days, sheriffs didn't even carry guns. This is something he somewhat does as well, as when we see them investigating Llewellyn's house, there's a little bit about how he doesn't have his.
What about yours?
I'm hiding behind you.
This ends up being something he goes back on though when he gets to the motel. Bell ends up pulling his gun, and this is him finally accepting this new world. He almost encounters death and likely decides it's too much and then realizes it's time to retire. Bell represents the idea of a past filled with morality and ethics who's unsure how to operate in this new world, which seemingly doesn't have any. His life was a small town where everybody knew everyone and people would show empathy and kindness. Now he's in the age of the serial killer and cartels who'll kill just to prove a point. On the opposite side of Bell is Anton Chigurh, who represents chaos, violence and death. We'll talk about him more as we get into the video, but this pair are very much opposite sides of the same coin. Coins play a big part in the film, and there's this emphasis on the dichotomy of law and order versus chaos and illegality. Illegality, is that a word? Well, you know what I mean. This is hammered home in a scene in the trailer which takes place at different points in the film. Chigurh sees himself reflected in the TV, which is also something that Bell does as well. The pair both sit and drink the milk, and together they're sat in the exact same spot. However, Bell's reflection's refracted, which symbolically carries a lot of meaning. This shows that he doesn't quite recognize the world he's now looking at, and this movie is very much about his failure. In the end, he decides to retire, which is because there's no country for old men.
He said it! He said it!
Nah, but the book itself, It's very much Bel's story, and yeah, each chapter begins with his narration. Throughout it, we also learn of his past, which I definitely think helps to flesh out his character. In it, we discover he served in the Second World War, and one night had a transformative moment. Bel's unit was attacked by the Germans, and in the end, he fled to save himself. Throughout the book, he wrestles with the guilt of this, and struggles to deal with the men that died while he ran away. To make up for this, he became a sheriff, which would be his way of protecting people. In the end, Bel ends up retiring because he realizes he can no longer do that. Bel sees himself as being unfit for the job and unable to make a difference in these vastly changing times.
I always like to hear about the old timers.
This is because he likes to hear about that imagined past in which things were seemingly better. It also highlights how he views himself as someone out of time. He thinks he would have been better then, but he's been dealt the hand to live in a time where the world's getting worse. He wonders how they would have handled these days, but I think that speaks to his character. Bel himself is really an old-timer who's stuck wondering this because he finds himself stuck here. He's wondering how these people would have handled it so he can inform himself what he should do. It's masterful dialogue that lets you know of his predicament and how he feels out of time. Now from this point he rattles off a story about a man he caught who assaulted and killed a 14-year-old girl. Bel at one point tried to understand why he did it, but he says,
I don't know what to make of that.
It shows that he's out of his depth and unable to comprehend the psychopathy that's rampant in the world. The book touches upon this too, with the character saying it's not about what he'd have to do, it's about what he'd have to become. In order to beat Chigurh, he'd have to become him, and it's not something he's willing to do. He even remarks that he doesn't want to put his chips down and bet against something he doesn't understand. Bets are a big part of the film too, with the coin flip being an incredible scene. Beyond that though, there's other 50-50 bets with Bel that you might not have noticed. But you can bet, we'll talk about them in just a bet. Again though, it's about how these older figures can't handle the way the world's changed, as they can't comprehend what they see.
You know, if you'd have told me 20 years ago, I'd see children walking the streets of our Texas towns with green hair.
Obviously, you know, that stuff's commonplace now, but back then, people thought it was ending society. Jump forward to the present, and we all have things that we see where we probably think that's the downfall of the world right there. The old man yells at cloud meme, yeah, that's gonna forever be relevant. Now, the title itself comes from a poem called Sailing to Byzantium. Created by W.B. Yeats, the poem is about a man sailing to Byzantium to try and find a way to stop being old, which you can see in Bel with the idea of staying up to date and being relevant with what's going on. Ultimately though, this is a folly, and Bel realizes he just can't keep up. Either way, it's in this opening that we meet Chigurh, who's then shoved into the back of a police car. Now, huge shoutouts to Logos Made Flesh, who did a brilliant breakdown discussing the figure. They said something that's truly changed my perspective, and that is the design of Chigurh himself. The YouTuber theorized that Chigurh is the personification of death, with the character taking somewhat inspiration for his depiction in the Seventh Seal. Chigurh's hair could create what almost resembles a hood, and this ill-fitting cut makes his face seem more square. Beyond that though, the Seventh Seal has notable characteristics of the Grim Reaper, which Chigurh also follows. The Reaper carries a scythe, which is a tool used on farms, whereas Chigurh carries a cattle gun, which is used on farms with cattle. The Seventh Seal also has Death playing chess with a knight. This is the latter gambling for his life and trying to beat Death. In the film, we see Chigurh taunting that man with a coin flip in which the outcome will determine his fate. Again, gambling is life. Huge shout out to them for seeing these similarities, and to me, Chigurh sees himself as a vessel of fate. He seemingly does things that are random acts of violence. However, when you think about it, to him they're not random. He very much blames his victims for making choices in life that put them on a path which led to him. He sees himself as delivering fate to those that were unlucky enough to cross his path.
If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?
To me, this is exemplified in two big moments in which Anton's targets escape with their lives. The first of these is, of course, the shopkeeper in that coin scene. Anton flips the coin to see this guy's fate, and the coin basically tells him his fate's that he should live. Coin flips are something that are often used to make decisions, and I have to admit, I've done it a lot too. Whenever there's something that I just can't decide on, I tend to flip a coin to try and help with a decision. I'll be honest though, sometimes I'll do like a best out of 3, but even having that doubt about the first outcome, that helps me to decide. Keep flipping until I get what I want, which shows what I want in the end, that sort of thing. Now, what's important about the coin toss with the shopkeeper is that there's actually three factors here. The first is fate, which comes in the form of Chigurh, who arrives in this moment. The second is free will, in which the man makes a choice in which he chooses between heads or tails. The third is just luck, but it's as important as the other two. To me, these are the three factors that make up almost every decision and outcome, with them being the three pillars of life. We will talk about how luck appears throughout the film too, but the next victim I want to focus on is the bird on the bridge. During this we see Chigurh shoot at it, but he misses and it flies away. Neither of these are things Chigurh had to kill, and on the surface they seem like random acts of violence. However, he felt like this was something he had to do because, again, fate put them on the path to him. He sees the bird flying away as being fate, and it also hints at something else with him. You see, Chigurh's not the perfect killer, and though he has this belief, he's subject to it too. Driving away at the end, he gets hit with a car, which is fate itself coming after him. It shows that he's still victim to the random chaos that is life, and isn't this invincible instrument. Anton's idea of fate has become a code to him though, which he believes justifies his actions. This has given him power over life and death, and he believes he's acting for a higher power. As Carla Jean says though,
The Coen don't have no say. It's just you.
Which, when you get down to it, it's the truth behind the matter. Chigurh is just a violent man in a violent world, trying to make sense of the chaos he sees around him. At least that's how I see it anyway, but fate is very much the driving force in Chigurh's actions. The website lichcharts.com, that's got a brilliant analysis on the book and film, and they talk about all the factors of fate seen in Chigurh. Chigurh knows that everyone's gonna die one day and that we are all eventually doomed to this fate. What will factor into how long that takes though is luck and free will, but in the end, all fate's decided. Fate is also evil and cruel, with it often rewarding those who act in their own best interests. Moss could have easily have left the cartel dealer, but his consciousness weighed on him and he headed back to help the guy with water. This had almost got him killed, and had he not done it, then he would have been okay. He lives his life based around rules, as does Carson, but Carson's rules fail him and lead him to his death. Bill is someone who follows the rule of law, and this is what he sees as being how you're supposed to live. This puts him as an opposite to Chigurh, with them both being opposite sides of the same coin. Again, playing into that notion. We also have the exemplifications of greed shown in several characters who consistently want more and more. Moss could have easily have ditched the money, but instead he ended up losing it all. There's also the group he buys the jacket from, who keep demanding more for the beer. Lastly are the kids on the bike, and as Anton walks away we can hear them fighting over the money. I think this is why Chigurh is kind of above them, because he doesn't really want the money for himself. He returns it rather than being greedy, and thus doesn't pay a cost. Now we begin with Chigurh being shoved in the back of the car after being pulled over. In the narration, we hear the names of several sheriffs who actually existed in real life.
Jim Scarborough never carried one, that's the younger Jim. Gaston Borkins wouldn't wear one up in Comanche County.
These again are real life figures from the time, with the pair being sheriffs of the counties where the movie takes place. Now the year itself is 1980, which we get confirmed at multiple points. The date on the coin is 1958, and we discover that it's travelled for 22 years. June 5th, 1980s, on the Southwestern Bell phone bill that Chigurh looks at, and Carla Jean's mother's grave has the year on it too. Thus, we kinda get the tone for the film, and this was a time in which serial killers seemed to be on the rise. Figures like Ted Bundy were garnering headlines just 2 years prior, and it seemed like there was an epidemic. Even today, we're fascinated with all that as well. Due to DNA though and surveillance, killers are a lot easier to track and imprison. Back then, no one really knew which person was hiding a monster behind their face. There was a lot more mystery and fear, and we're still getting documentaries on the people from that time to this day. Murder is something we see from the off, with Chigurh also representing this. Strangling an officer, we see his boots scrape the floor, leaving thick black marks that demonstrate the struggle. Chigurh does this mercilessly though, and is completely cold and compassionless. That's always stuck with me, seeing those boots on the floor, and even if I scrape my own boots, I'm like, oh, no country for old men. Business Insider, they actually carried out an investigation in 2018 in which they had a group of psychiatrists studying films. This was in order to identify psychopathic characters, with Chigurh coming out as being the most accurate. He's clearly unfeeling and adept at killing, which we see demonstrated in how he moves. Chigurh shifts and rotates with the sheriff, and this means that he can't get a foothold. All it leaves is the marks on the floor, which are a chilling reminder of what's just happened. Now in the back there, you can also hear the sound of a train, which I think carries a lot of meaning to it. Trains are of course stuck on a track, and thus the destination's always the same. They are assigned to their path, and in the end, they all go to what's predetermined. When discussing why trains were used so often, the creative team also said the following. We had to find a way to give Chigurh his normal theme with sound instead of using a music piece, so we started experimenting with that distant thunder rumble, and that led to the train motif. Those locomotive noises shadow Chigurh throughout, subliminally reinforcing his heavy, unstoppable approach. The idea was Chigurh's a force that comes and goes, and like the fate he represents, he's on the wind. He's like the wind. I move these as well because it do my head in. Now at this point, he takes the police car and pulls someone over. He then uses the bolt gun and mercilessly kills the driver just to get the car. Now in the book, this was done in almost a religious manner. He puts his thumb to his forehead like a priest or a vicar. Chigurh says that if you're imitating someone, it might as well be God, and he's someone who has control of life and death. Now the reason that Chigurh carries a cattle gun is because of how he views humanity. Like I said, this was studied on Lich Chart, who did the better than me in terms of an explanation. It says, typically the air-powered bolt gun is utilized in slaughterhouses to quickly and effectively slaughter cattle. The fact that Chigurh uses the bolt gun to kill his victims speaks to his conception of human beings as no different than animals. Chigurh does not believe in the concept of the soul or the afterlife, so in his mind, humans are no different than any other organism. The bolt gun was also developed as a tool that limits the chance of mistake in the slaughter of cattle. In the old days, individuals would use sledgehammers, but this old method left plenty of room for error. Because Chigurh's goal is to deliver death quickly and effectively without any room for error, the bolt gun provides the most effective means to carry out his mission. The bolt gun is also an immensely pragmatic tool Chigurh uses to gain entrance to homes, businesses and motels. So all around, it's the perfect weapon for him, and this idea of cattle's exemplified in the victim here. He simply herded out the car and let Chigurh kill him without any protest. The guy doesn't ask why he's not in uniform, he doesn't try and move away when he starts acting weird, doesn't ask why he's being made to hit the thumbs up, he just lets him put it to his head and then coldly kill him. It shows how complicit people become in the face of authority and how little questions they ask because they think someone else is in charge. Now an opposite to this is Moss, who's a guy that won't go with the crowd. This is exemplified in his first scene in which we see him hunting. This puts him in a dominant position in which he's a predator picking off his prey. Like Chigurh, he's able to kill quote-unquote animals too, but his shot doesn't deal a killing blow. Instead, it allows his target to escape and it limps away, leaving a trail of blood. This foreshadows what happens later on when Chigurh and Moss finally have a shootout. Moss manages to shoot Chigurh and he limps away, leaving a trail of blood. Now it's once he notices another trail that he sees a dog limping off, and at this point fate comes into play. Well, fate, luck, free will and so on, but either way he stumbles across a drug deal gone wrong. It's luck that caused him to not deal a killing blow, and it was then that fate led him to this point. The look of the blood trail and showed him the site, and it was fate from this point that caused him to get involved. Now another thing I love about this film is that we often just see the aftermath of a shootout. This is very much the case with the cartel, and it also happens in the case of Moss. Chigurh stumbles across his body towards the end, which reflects the well in here coming across the cartel. Now one of the trucks, he finds one of them alive, and this is something that stays on his mind. Though he takes the money and could easily be gone, he decides to go back and help him. It's very much the saying, no good deed goes unpunished, but in the end, it does extend his life. You see, the money itself had a tracking device, so Chigurh would have simply showed up to his trailer. Llewellyn's free will made him choose to go and give the water, which then changed his fate. As luck would have it, he managed to escape, though fate eventually caught him in the end. Now from here he goes and looks for the last man standing, who we see sat under a tree. Moss holds up his watch and the time's 20 to 12ish. Bit of useless trivia, but they shot this scene at the time so that the shadows would appear like how they do in real life. Also saves them having to wind up the watch. Under the tree, Moss gets the briefcase, which is an Easter egg for Coen Brother fans. This is the same one that appeared in Fargo, which I might do a breakdown on the channel at some point. I did say that on the last video, but I've got the 4K now, so Maybe one day. Let me know if I should do it. Any comment to boost engagement? How's your day going as well? Write that too. Opening it up, we see stacks of $100 bills, which is important for what we learn later on. When Llewellyn discovers the tracking device, we can see this is inside $1 bills. This was so that if that got tossed away, the loss wouldn't be too bad. Putting a tracking device in also shows how suspicious the cartel was and that they were expecting things to go wrong. However, this paranoia might have been what made the deal go south, as we do know they did indeed bring the drugs. So yeah, the money was there, the drugs were there, should have been a simple exchange in which everyone just subscribed.
Can't be that easy.
Either way, Moss returns home, and on the TV, you can hear the characters saying this.
My place is wrong.
Love how they mention a bad hiding spot after he's just placed the money under the trailer. This is the film Flight to Tangier, which itself is about characters looking for $3 million.
Liar! Liar!
It's $2 million in the movie, but you get the idea, mate. Unable to sleep, he then heads out, but we get a very strange line at this point.
If I don't come back, you tell Mother I love her.
Now why that's strange is because right after, Willynch is dead.
Your mother's dead, Llewellyn.
Well, then I'll tell her myself.
On Reddit though, Death by Chocolates theorized that this line foreshadows what's going to happen to his wife. He likely knows the people will come looking for the money and this could end up with her being killed. So her talking to his mother is because they'll both die and be in the afterlife, which the user thought showed how careless he was. This could also be backed up by the fact that Chigurh basically holds his wife to ransom and says, look, I will not kill her if you hand back the briefcase. I could get an Oscar for that, mate. In the end though he gets told this ultimatum, Moss doesn't hand it back. Chigurh then goes to visit her, and yeah, he knows he's doing the wrong thing. Now that's kind of looking at it in the framework of a movie, but personally, I just think it's his PTSD and the fact that he's clearly not thinking straight. He knows it's a stupid idea, he knows he shouldn't be doing it, and yeah, he's still doing it, so yeah, he's clearly not thinking straight. Now, the reason I mentioned PTSD is that we know he's seen combat before and that he was a Vietnam veteran. I do wonder if, like the sheriff, he regrets something from the war and perhaps maybe even left someone to die. This could be him trying to make good on that, as the guilt clearly won't allow him to sleep. Sat in his truck, we then see him looking over a map, which is him trying to plan an escape route. Arriving there, we can see the thirsty man's being executed because the glass behind him's been blown out. Cut back to the scene before, and you'll notice that it isn't smashed up there. Spotting a truck on the hill, you can see as they slash his tires, and from this point, he has to escape on foot. As he runs, he then gets shot in the shoulder, which overall was actually a bit lucky for Brolin. Let me explain. According to IMDb trivia, Brolin got the part, and then 2 days later, he ended up in a motorbike crash. That's not the lucky part though. He said that he was worried this had ruined his chances of working with the Coens, who were directors he greatly admired. However, they explain it wouldn't really matter because Moss injures his shoulder in the movie and that's all part of the character. Now from here we cut to the gas station and learn about the coin. I've always found it funny how we see 21 on the till and the coin's been travelling for 22 years. Now just a little theory time, but I think this might show that the guy's number could be up. Due to his choices, he's had 21 years and must now play a game of death to get that 22. He's clearly not 21 years old, but he might have been at the shop for 21 years. Either way though, why Chigurh's doing this is because the attendant noticed the car was from Dallas and might tip off the police. Just the way Chigurh stands though, it's so intimidating, and he mocks the clerk's life and choices while shoving peanuts in his mouth. Even the way he eats them as well is just something off about it, and you really don't know what the guy would make of this. Chigurh almost lets it slip, but he leaves things even more unnerving by pretending it was just a normal coin.
What'll get mixed in with the others and becoming just a coin.
Which yeah, I'll take your word for it, mate. To him though, all he's doing is carrying out fate's will. As he says, he got there the same way the coin did, and the final shot of him wandering off seems to showcase that as well. He's hobbling along to who knows where, but continuing to go where fate's gonna take him. He's like the wind, like I said before. Back at the trailer, Moss then tells Carla Jean to go to her mother's, which is something that impacts her later on. Out in the desert, we then see the other side of the deal investigating it. These are the ones with the money who import the drugs and then sell them. Chigurh ends up killing these two men, which when you watch it, you're probably like, why? Well, put simply, this is because Chigurh wants to work alone. Later on with the accountant, we even see him questioning why so many people are looking for the money.
He felt that the more people looking...
That's foolish. You pick the one right tool.
Chigurh sees himself as being the right tool, like me, because I'm a right tool, and that everyone else is just gonna slow him down. This is also why he kills Carson. To him, he's the only one needed, and everyone else is just gonna get in the way. He wants to be the one that delivers fate to Moss, and having others alongside him, that deeply offends him. This is why he kills the guy in the office who is that Stephen Root? Anyway, he's clearly mad that he wasn't trusted and views this lack of confidence as being highly offensive. From here we then see Belle and Wendell investigating the scene, and at this point they recognise Moss's truck. Coming across the two Chigurhs just killed, they also say they look managerial. As we later learn, this is all run by a company, and this shows that it had been using its own men. This explains how and why they had a tracker, whereas Chigurh wasn't given one. Once Chigurh took it, the company then probably gave one to the Mexicans, and this was to have more people on the job. Anyway, after Chigurh investigates the trailer, he goes to the woman who works at the site. She refuses to give over any info and is just like, "We can't chat out any information.
When have you taken my lorazepams?
Now, you might wonder why he spares her life when he's had no trouble killing and threatening others. The first reason, I think, is, well, beyond the amazing impression and accent, it's because he has a toilet flush in the background.
We can't give out no information.
This obviously lets them know that someone else is there, and there's a chance they could escape and call the police. Second reason though, and it's a reach, I'll admit it, it's that this woman lives by rules and no matter what refuses to break them. I can see someone like Chigurh respecting this and it factoring into why he spares her. Thirdly, just the look of the toilet flush happening there, he might take that as being a sign of fate. Saved by the flush, if you will. Either way, she's spared, and we see as Moss drops his wife off on the bus before heading to Del Rio. Giving the option of rate, we see as he splashes out on a double room. This is really fancy as well, because he's just by himself. Obviously though, he's flush with cash, and he's been saved by the flush as well, eh? Now, this could also be interpreted as him trying to throw people off the scent, as he's clearly aware he's being followed. This is shown by him hiding the case, and then drawing the curtains closed, even though he's going out. Later on, when he returns to the motel, he can spot someone's been in his room. This is because the curtains have been open, and thus he tells the driver to take him somewhere else. As they pull in, you can see a truck parked up as well, which becomes something that reappears throughout the film. This belongs to the other people chasing him, and it's who eventually get Moss in the end. As Belle pulls in the motel, we can see it speeding away with its members jumping in the back. Realizing that his paranoia is right, he then buys a shotgun and a tent, which he says has to have the most poles.
Well, you give me the model number on the tent, I can order you the poles.
Never mind, I want a tent.
Well, what kind of tent?
Kind with most poles.
This is so that he can fish out the briefcase using the poles to reach into the vent. So he's smart, that's why he needs the most poles. He also buys another room so he can stay close to the money. Pulling out a map of the motel, he insists on getting 38. Even though the one next door to him is 2 double beds, he doesn't have to walk around the compound. This is because 38 is the one directly to the back of him, and it means he can listen in if anyone comes looking for him. Obvious stuff, but I just thought would put that in there because we're being as thorough as possible. Now Chigurh ends up getting a room, and you might wonder what he's doing. After all, he opens the door, closes it, and then walks about inspecting it. Well, this is because he's planning his ambush and trying to figure out where everyone will be. Been reading a lot of Bond books for our breakdown series, and this is something the spy does in Goldfinger. He figures out his room's the same layout as the villains and practices going through an ambush. There he ends up seeing Jill Masterton, but Chigurh gets less of a warm welcome. He checks the thickness of the wall to see if a weapon will fire through it, and also does something that's very, very important. This involves him taking off his shoes. This is because he doesn't want blood on them, which we also see play out with Carson as well. After killing him, we see the blood spill towards him, and he then decides to move his shoes out the way. Now why I'm telling you this is because it spells out at the end that Chigurh does indeed kill Carla Jean. Though we never see him give the killing blow, there's a little clue as he steps out the house. We see Chigurh checking his boots, and this is to see if they have any blood on them. Had Carla Jean survived the coin toss, then there'd be no need for him to do this. In the book, we do get it confirmed, so that's another piece of evidence that hints towards her fate. Now, movies based on books can, of course, do different things, but there's something in the sound design that I think confirms it. As Chigurh steps out, we hear the sounds of bikes, which comes from the 2 boys riding in the street. That sound, though, also appears at another crucial point. namely when Carla Jean buries her mother. So in the end, I think these moments all come together and show how we know Carla Jean died in the end. Now Chigurh ends up walking to the other room, and his shoes being off help him to stay silent. However, we again see that he's not perfect, as he incorrectly predicts where one of the men are hiding. Shooting at the cupboard, there's no one there, and it's something that could have cost him his life. Luck wasn't on his side, and after shooting it, a guy steps out and almost gets a shot at him. Luckily, he's able to react quickly, and he kills him before taking out the final member. Drawing the curtain closed, this also stops him from getting bloodied, and it's at this point he takes off his socks. He'll be able to hide his feet in the boots, hence why he took them off in the first place. At this point he then pulls out the coins, which he uses to open up the vents. This is something Belle later finds on the floor next to an open one, cementing that Chigurh had indeed been there too. Now from here we cut to Carson, who's played by my man Woody Harrelson. He's been hired because he's crossed paths with Chigurh, but unlike most, he managed to survive. I do kind of wish they touched upon this more, and perhaps Carson even survived his own sort of coin flip. Another interesting detail is that in the book, they mentioned some dope dealers that shot and killed a federal judge. This could actually have ties with Harrelson, as in real life his dad shot and killed a judge in 1979. Both of these incidents happened in San Antonio, with his dad possibly being what this reference was. If you've never heard of him before, like, it's genuinely mental, and I dare you right now, double dog dare you, I dare you to go down the Woody Harrelson dad rabbit hole. He was implicated in things like JFK's death, and I feel like they could actually make a movie on his life starring Woody Harrelson. Anyway, when describing Chigurh, he says,
"He's a psychopathic killer, but so what?"
This could be seen as him bigging himself up to be more dangerous than Chigurh is, as to him, psychopaths are a dime a dozen, and he clearly isn't scared. I believe that the scene also deals in luck, as well as points out the missing floor.
Counted the floors to this building from the street.
And?
There's one missing.
Now, this in itself could mean a number of different things, and the most likely of these is that it involves luck. Superstition often had builders missing out the 13th floor because many believed that that number was unlucky. Like, they didn't miss out, they still built a floor, but they just went from 12 to 14. Don't want to get that confused. Here though, Wells could be pointing out the bad luck, and as both these characters die, that could be why. This idea of missing out 13 is also seen later at the motel. When Belle returns at night looking for Chigurh, we can see there's two doors with tape outside of them. This jumps from 114 to 112, completely missing out the number 113. I do want to talk about that moment later on, but I think that's what Carson means in this moment. However, in the book it's revealed that the missing floor is the 17th, which isn't listed for security reasons. Turns out this is where the illegal operations are run from, and that's why it's kind of brushed to the side. Still though, it helps to paint out Wells as being observant, and the IRS clearly haven't spotted this. Anyway, Moss goes to a hotel and we see him checking into room 213. Yeah, you know what that means, mate. You know what that means. He also asks the man checking him in to give him a heads up if someone comes in looking for him. Later on, we learn Chigurh killed this guy, and there's actually a moment before this in which you can faintly hear the shot. Here's how it is in the film. However, with a little bit of editing magic, we can boost that so you can hear it slightly better. Did that on both breakdowns and got you both times, you sucker. Oh no, here's the clip for real. This is of course what also alerts Moss, and it comes off the back of him discovering the transponder. And that's because we catch him lying in bed, once more unable to sleep. This echoes the moment from earlier with the water, which again shows how a choice changed his fate. Standing up against the wall, we see a picture with two people riding horseback, which many have interpreted as being Belle's dream. He talks about riding out with his dad, and it may be foreshadowing that. Anyway, we see as Moss watches the door and catch Chigurh's shadow coming from under it. It's such a chilling moment when you can just see 2 feet standing there, and you really don't know what way it's gonna go. Here we hear the beep of the transponder, and it's Moss clicking the gun that makes Chigurh realize that he's waiting. It's at this point that he then goes and turns out the lights and shoots a lock off, which almost acts like a bullet. Now this shootout's really intense, but during it, the pair never come face to face. That's throughout the whole film as well. We never see the pair in the same room, and though they talk on the phone, there's always that distance. Throughout this fight, they just take pot shots at each other and get hit with strays as they run through the night. One thing you might notice as well is that when Moss discovers the dead receptionist, his cat's still alive. This is weird because here's a guy who happily shot at a bird before just because he passed it. Now why this was theorized by Wisecrack, who said it highlights his random acts of violence. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to what he does, and he seemingly just embodies chaos. They talked about how killing and harming animals is also known as the kick the dog trope, which is something that often lets you know who the bad guy in the movie is. Initially being popularized by westerns, it's just a shorthand way of saying this is the bad guy, you should hate him. Now going kind of off on a tangent, but it'll make sense in a bit. The other things that pull from a classic western are things like the classic hero archetypes here. Classic westerns used to feature good and bad, and this appeared literally as something black and white. The heroes wore white hats, the villains wore black, which we see in both Belle and Chigurh. Building off the back of this, Wisecrack brought up something that happened in the 60s. This saw the revisionist western, which started to deconstruct the confines of the genre. They added in characters that operated more in shades of grey, which they stated was more in line with Moss. Moss, of course, shot the dog earlier in the movie, which is normally something that the audience would hate. Again, it goes back to that kick the dog trope, but in that case, we can understand why he had to do it. However, the good lawman character in the movie even points out how bad it is to kill dogs.
Oh, hell's bells, they even shot the dog.
So, we aren't really even supposed to fully support Moss either. The dog is the same breed as the one Moss shot as well, which shows he's operating in those shades of grey. Belle is someone who's righteous and upstanding though, and he operates with full morality. Chigurh is someone who's evil, but he also has a code, though it goes off into doing dark things. Moss though, he sort of exists between the two. He will do things that are deemed bad, but also do things like go and give that guy water. So Chigurh just leaving this cat alive has a lot going on with it, and it's something you can really dive into. Now at this point, Moss makes it to a truck and almost gets the guy to drive him out of there. However, Chigurh ends up shooting him. This makes it so that Moss can't escape because someone's in the driver's seat and basically, yeah, he's got no way out. Still though, Moss makes an attempt and hazardly steers the truck down the road. Getting out, he manages to finally hit Chigurh, but unfortunately his enemy eludes him. Now this idea of being hunted and a hunter can be seen in Chigurh's name, which was created for the film. The name Seguar in Spanish means to follow, and Chikar also means hunter. Both of these fit the character perfectly, and all in all, Moss never fully gets the best of him. Now at this point, he heads across the border. He comes across some people and then buys a jacket and beer off them. If he was looking for some clothes though, yeah, should have gone to our merch store. There we've got our Predator inspired shirt, and also mate, also this one. It's game over, yeah, game over man, with xenomorphs on it. We also have our Superman inspired one as well, and lots of shirts that will make you look great any time of year. We also have a sale on now too, and currently one where if you buy 3, you get 20% off. So go there, Moss. Now the band that woke him up could be somewhat seen as mocking him. If you want a rough translation of the song, it's basically about how someone wanted riches and to touch the sky, but in the end they were playing with fire. That's the case with Moss here, who's now come face to face with death. Back in town, we cut to Chigurh, who's sitting outside the Mike Zoss pharmacy. This is a nod to Mike Zoss Drugs, which is where the Coen brothers apparently used to hang out. The location clearly meant a lot to them, as their production company's called Mike Zoss Productions. Chigurh then ends up robbing some supplies and in a motel room stitches himself up. On the opposite side of this, Moss ends up going to the hospital, which is where he's visited by Carson. In the book, they explain that he tracked his bloody footprints, and this is how he traced them to the location. Carson's approach is going as a friend, and he attempts to convince Moss to work together. We learn that Carson was in Vietnam as well, and because of this, he sees them as allies. Wells also warns him that he could go to Odessa and kill Carla Jean. He's overly confident and comes with a kind touch because he wants to know where the money is and knows that if he kills him, he'll never find out. His confidence is what leads to his death though. He believes he can outdo Chigurh, but it all basically comes down to luck, which is exemplified in the next scene. In it, we see Belle sat with Carla Jean, and he tells a story about a man who tried to put down a cow. He says that one day he tried to shoot one in the head, but it was thrashing around and caused the bullet to ricochet, which ended up hitting him. There's obvious allusions here to luck and chance, but the cow and cattle gun carries some connections. Chigurh is the one trying to put down Moss, but his thrashing around's causing more damage. In the end, we don't know how injured he gets, and this story could work as a metaphor for how things play out. Now, another thing here that shows he's out of his depth is because he basically describes what Chigurh is doing. Earlier in the film, they even talk about how Chigurh's victims were found without exit wounds. This is because of the way the bolt gun works, which fires a bolt that then goes back in. Belle Bell clearly knows of this killing too, but he never makes a connection. To him, these weapons wouldn't be used on a human, and thus it shows he truly doesn't understand this new world. Carson unfortunately then returns to the hotel, but he's unable to bargain with Chigurh. He offers him money, joins our membership program for 99 pence a month where you get early access to videos every week, tells him he doesn't have to do it, but in the end, he can't avoid his fate. Still though, he continues to struggle, but nothing he does is gonna change the outcome. The phone then rings, and Chigurh realizes that fate's intervened and now made it so he's not needed at all. At the other end is Moss, with this now setting up the final stage. Back with Bell, we hear a story about a couple that rented out rooms at a motel who then murdered them and cashed their social security. 5 stars on TripAdvisor. This was discovered because a man ran into the street wearing a dog collar. It was a chance escape that happened because of blind luck. It sums up what's now happening with the world while highlighting how chaotic existence is. Again, Bell can't understand it and he starts to question if he's fit to protect. If we look back at the Western conventions, it starts to become clear what his character is. Wisecrack pointed out that he's basically your old Western character who's now been dropped into a revisionist one. The old ones were simply good and evil, whereas the latter possessed those shades of grey. This is basically the good, the bad and the ugly, with each character fitting into these archetypes. At the border checkpoint, we then see as Moss is given preferential treatment because he's a veteran. Though the guard's questioning why he's in a hospital gown, he drops it as soon as he hears of his past. It's possible that this is why Bell did the same thing as well. As we learn at the end, he was also a military colonel. Returning to the clothes shop, we see a returning character from earlier in the movie when he first bought the clothes. To me though, this kind of shows Moss is getting sloppy because he's making it easier to be tracked. Calling from the airport, this eventually leads to his downfall as he gets Carla Jean and her mother to travel out to meet him. While this is going on, Chigurh kills the man who hired him and ends up sparing the accountant. This is after he says,
"Do you see me?"
with him later telling the 2 boys that they didn't see him. Had they said something differently, yeah, he probably would have killed them. Now, with Carla Jean and her mother, we see as they're being tailed and get a quick shot of the cartel in the car behind her. This is later the man who helps with her bags, and she unwittingly tells them where they're heading off to. Carla Jean then tips off Bell, which he does under the pretense of taking him in safely. While this is going on, we see Chigurh hitchhiking and even asking the chicken guy if he can get the crates out the back. We then cut to him cleaning off the feathers, and yeah, nice little joke that amongst all this. It's about death as well, so it fits in well with the tone. Now from here we cut across to Moss, who gets offered to go for a beer by a woman. These are back in her room though. We end the scene with Moss weighing up whether to join her, and whether he did or not is sort of ambiguous. However, I have my own theory time about it. Theory time, we're bringing it back. Theory. When Belle arrives, we see her dead in the pool, and because of this, I don't think Moss went with her. Again, we're going back to that idea of morality and how no good deed goes unpunished. That's because, had Moss gone with her back to the room, then he would have been cheating on his wife. Captain Obvious there, but that would have been the bad thing to do. However, in doing that, he would have been rewarded because he wouldn't have been killed. The cartel would have shown up, but he'd have been in her room and thus out the way where they were looking. Moss turning her down led to him being killed, and Belle arrives to find him dead in his door. It's a tragic way to close out the character, but that's the point of the film. What this is basically showing is the senseless nature of violence and how real life is often disappointing. Had this been, your old style of Western, you can pretty much predict how the movie would have gone. Moss would have ended up killing the baddies, and Belle would have killed or even arrested Chigurh. Moss would then ride off with Carla Jean, with him getting to live a life full of wonder. Instead, we see Carla arriving at the motel to find a crime scene and her husband sadly dead. There's no big showdown and nothing to be happy for, and yeah, it's pretty depressing. Now, a line that has always stuck out to me is how Bell feels about God. He thought that God would come into his life and make him see that everything has a meaning. This is sort of what the audience want as well, with something or someone basically coming to save the characters. Movies often give us the happy ending, but life isn't like that. Even though we know the characters are screwed, we expect God, Deus Ex Machina, that's basically what that means. It's that kind of thing to come in and help everybody out. Belle will somehow catch Chigurh, Moss will get away, and we'll watch as they ride off into the sunset. Instead, Moss dies, Belle retires, and Chigurh manages to escape the arm of the law. It's all just depressing and something that shows how cruel the world is. Belle then returns to an old pal who we learn got shot in the line of duty. Asked if he'd kill the guy if he ever got released, he just says, what would be the point? What would be the point? This is quite a sobering line as it shows how important that acceptance is. He then gives the truth of the world and really explains how everything is. He says that what Belle wants is nothing new and the world's always been hard on people. You look at the World Wars, the Civil Wars, and basically everything before that. It's always been shit. This in itself is a universal fact and something that I've argued with countless people. Every generation has those elderly figures that complain about the good old days, and this goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I bet, right, like if you got a time machine and went back to ancient Rome, you'd catch someone saying things aren't as good as they used to be. The whole point is the world's always been terrible, but as you get older, you just start to notice it. Remember also as well, this movie's set in the 80s, which nowadays is a time that people look back to fondly. The world, unfortunately, is a cruel, cruel place, and those good old days never really existed. We always look at the past with rose-tinted glasses though. Listen to We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. Basically, the story behind that song is that he had Sean Lennon in the studio, and Sean was going, everything's crap these days, it sucks. This was like back in the night where whenever he wrote the song. And Billy goes, what you mean? It's always been crap. And then the reason the song is a list is because he's basically going through everything that was crap. I'm not a music analysis guy, yeah, I'm more for movies. From here, we then get a line where the guy tells Belle that what he has is vanity.
That's vanity.
Belle believes it's up to him to save the world, which isn't really possible. It's a savior complex. Ultimately, in the end, he realizes he's not this hero, and thus he steps back. That's what I take to be what Belle learns, and we'll talk about his dream later on. However, he has to pass one final test, and we see as he goes to the motel. Now this scene has a number of interpretations, one of which I'll go through before I then go on to my own. So online, one of the major beliefs is that when we see Chigurh stood behind the door, that this is actually Belle's anxiety. Chigurh did travel there earlier in the film though, which we get confirmed by the coin on the floor. This makes sense too, as when Belle stares at the lock, you can see what looks like a figure moving in the reflection. However, when the door opens, nobody's there. The fact Belle saw what could be Chigurh and still decided to open the door, that's very, very important though. It shows he's ready to confront his fear, even though he thinks that this killer's behind the door. Finally, he's willing to put his chips on the table. Now ultimately, this shows his strength because he's willing to face the man behind it. Honestly though, yeah, it is a good interpretation, but personally, I like to think Chigurh was there. Now what I mean by that is that there's two doors with both being covered up by police tape. This creates a 50-50 choice, much like its own little coin flip. To me, Chigurh's hiding behind one of the doors, and this is why we cut to him standing there. This is clearly happening at night, and thus I feel it shows that he's there alongside him. If we see the way the door opens, this also bangs out to where Chigurh would be stood. I highly doubt he would stand there knowing that the door could hit him, and instead he'd move to the other side. Therefore, knowing that, the door must be on the other side, meaning that he's hiding out in the other room. If that's the case, then Belle survived because he ended up choosing the right door. To me at least. Anyway, from here we cut to Carla Jean, who we can see burying her mother. Going back home, she notices the windows open, which is obviously how Chigurh got in. Now Carla Jean really makes him confront his worldview as she refuses to take part in his game. In the end, it's him who's forced to make the choice, showing what he truly is. Chigurh is just a violent man who thinks he's acting for a higher power. Really though, he's just acting for himself, and in many ways, the universe betrays him. Karma comes in and kicks his ass, potentially showing how it's no longer on his side. Because he still carried out the kill without letting Carla choose, he might now be on his own. Carla Jean is the only person to speak to all three characters, and this may be why she ends up taking him down. Mentally at least. Either way, in the end we see he's just like any other person who has to take responsibility for what they do. Though she dies, she may have destroyed his worldview, and the movie tells us that his looks kind of run out. That's kind of what I took from the car hitting him, the way he hobbles off, you know, he's not going to be a skilled assassin from now on, likely. But let me know exactly what you think. Wait, is that the kid from First Class? Is that the bloody guy from Get Out? Anyway, we end with Belle discussing his dreams. In it, he says he met his father, who died before the age he is, so now he seems like a younger man. This is something that's always stuck out to me, and I think it's something a lot of people experience. The first dream just had the pair meeting in town, whereas the second dream has them meeting up in older times. He says they rode out into the mountains with them passing through snow and darkness. His dad rode past him carrying a fire and Belle desperately tried to get to him.
Then I woke up.
Now, the way I take this is that he's trying to find comfort in this dark and depressing place, which he hopes will come from his father. He wants those older figures to guide him through, which children often expect with their parents. However, he's never going to get that, and he'll always wake up from the dream. This will hit him with the cold harshness of the world, in which he realizes there's no one to help. Kind of depressing, but that's how I took it. However, Wendigoon had a different interpretation. He said Cormac McCarthy tends to tie the themes of his books together, so they all kind of work with one another. The road ends, I don't know if you've read it or seen the movie, but the road, basically, it's an apocalypse, father and son thing, bad thing happens, but the boy decides in the end to keep carrying the fire. I will keep the hope burning is basically the message that you get from it. So I feel that book ending with that, it's possible the dream itself shows that there's always going to be hope. That will push forth and go through the darkness, and yeah, I really enjoy that interpretation, especially after reading this, and it kind of ties it all nicely together and ends the video on a positive note. We've also done a video on one of the crazier theories around the film about how Chigurh isn't actually real, he's just a manifestation of the evil that Belle imagines. This is how he's able to walk around with a massive gun and have people not pay attention to him. Belle never crosses his path, and since it's his story, you think he would have in order to say what he's like. So yeah, there is an interpretation there, check that out if you're interested, but yeah, something to think about. Either way, this is a story that centers around three characters who all have somewhat similarities and differences to them. In the opening montage, we cut to three windmills throughout, and the first is in the distance with that representing Belle. He stood off away from what was really going on. The next is moss, which is represented in the next windmill. The last one seems darker, and it's broken, thus representing Chigurh. It's details like this that show the attention to detail in the movie and how much they really put into the film. Now definitely go check out those other channels that I mentioned in the video, as they've all got amazing analysis on the film. I hope you've enjoyed this one too, and I'm glad I could finally redo this video in a way that I wanted to do in the first place and actually not get it blocked and not look like a slideshow. So thank you for watching through this video essay again, if this is your second time seeing it. I'd love to hear your thoughts below, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos like this every week, and for just 99p a month, you know, you can pay for 1 month, get 4 videos or however many we put out, more than 4 a lot of the time, but I don't want to make promises. But yeah, it all helps towards helping videos like this get made. Now if you want something else to watch yet, we've got a breakdown on the screen right now. Huge thank you for checking this one out though. You've been the best. I've been your host Paul. I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.